Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Good to have you here. Paul Trini here with the one and only Aaron Nace in the house. What?
So good to be here. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for the wonderful team here at Adobe. And thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to have a fantastic time. And we're going to learn some Photoshop compositing.
Yeah. How about that? You might know a little bit about Photoshop, I hear.
So I hope I know at least a tiny bit, or else why am I here?
I know, right? Just a little. He knows a little bit. He's only been doing like 6,000 videos or so on like YouTube, and you run PHLEARN and all that stuff, and yeah, you do all sorts of things. And yeah, we're super excited to have you here. We're super excited to have Jimmy here, and Victor, and Van Dam.
Shirt.
Ahmad.
Jimmy says shirt. Oh, bird shirt.
A PHLEARN-tastic time, that's right.
We're gonna have a PHLEARN-tastic time.
Yeah.
It's hard not to have a PHLEARN-tastic time.
Right? We're just gonna make cool stuff. Is that the plan?
That is the plan.
Cool stuff.
That is the plan. And I'm so excited because today, there's a little graphic running.
Yeah, today we have you for 2 hours, which is awesome. So we're not gonna let you go for 2 hours. So it's gonna be cool. We'll kind of continue what you were working on yesterday. Ted Chin is up next, 11 to 1, 1 to 3, Alexandria. Like 3 awesome people, basically a full day of Photoshop compositing today and tomorrow. And yeah, I think it's gonna be a blast. It is a blast. So
it's already started being a blast.
Yeah, that's right. And we haven't even had our coffee yet. Just wait.
Just have to continue having a blast.
Yeah, so also we'll just do a random chat and win giveaway in about 30 minutes just because we can. There's also the challenge tab. You can check that out, which would be right over there. I think.
Backwards.
Yeah, I
it's
don't
right
know.
There.
I think it's there. It should be.
Definitely right there.
It's definitely right over there.
It's right there for sure.
So check that out, and you could potentially win. But that's all about creating your own fantasy world, and you'll certainly learn some tips from Aaron on compositing to lend itself to that challenge. And if you're new here, we want to hear from you. Or even if you're old here, like me. I'm just old here. I would love to hear from you as well. We're just really starving for attention is what we are. I'll let you take over, man. Are you gonna kind of
fantastic?
I would like. I don't know if you're gonna do like quick recap. I know you have an image up already.
Yeah, we're gonna do a quick recap here. So for those of you who've joined us yesterday, thanks for coming back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the broadcast. Yesterday, we kind of worked on some of the fundamentals of compositing. We talked about some ideas like matching light. We showed you how to match scale and perspective in a composite. And we kind of just went over what compositing is in general. Now, there are several different types of compositing, and we're going to focus on one of those types of compositing today, which is called frame compositing. And then we're gonna focus on a different type of compositing tomorrow, which is element compositing. So frame compositing, for those of you who don't know, is basically the idea you can take multiple images with your camera. Camera is usually on a tripod for this case, and put those images together using Photoshop. So it's a fantastic way to start your work with compositing. These images tend to be very realistic, and they're also pretty simple to do. You don't need complicated equipment. In fact, you can do them with a smartphone. So we're gonna go over a few examples of frame compositing today, because when you start working with frame compositing, you realize there's a lot you can do by keeping your compositing very, very simple. So I just wanna give a few examples of some interesting things we can do. Before we get started in frame compositing, we are going to do a little wrap up of what we were working on yesterday.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, because
like right here on the screen.
It's this image that we're looking at. So we started off yesterday, we showed you how to match scale and perspective. So if you haven't watched that broadcast, be sure to do so. They can check out the rebroadcast, is that correct?
Yeah, oh totally. Replays tab, check that out. You can kind of scrub through that and see everything happen. So yeah, even today is being recorded. So if you have to step away, you can always kind of come back to it.
Yeah.
We encourage that.
No worries. So today we're gonna kind of pick up where we left off yesterday. We kind of focused on some of the fundamentals and talked about matching light as well as perspective. And we took our image to this point yesterday. Now I'm gonna hit F for full screen. My goal here today is to make this look a little bit more realistic. Now, the line here right in the middle, this is a guide that we set up as the horizon. So we first calculated the horizon of our background. Then we calculated the horizon of my subject. If I just re-enable my subject's background, we can see this is about the horizon line of my subject. And again, if this is at all, if you want to know more, just check out yesterday's broadcast. So by matching the horizon line, we are basically matching the perspective of my subject and the background. So we went ahead and just did the cutout to make things a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And now we're going to focus on making it actually look realistic. So let's go ahead and get rid of this guide. We don't need it anymore. We've got our subject pretty much in place. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we're going to do to make our subject look more realistic in this place. So let's go ahead. We're going to go to View. I'm going to go down to Clear Guides. Just get that guide away there. All right, well, let's go ahead and zoom in. I'm going to make some notes on this image so we're all on the same page. It's a really helpful strategy to just kind of get your notes and figure out what you're going to do, what needs to be done. So first thing we have, and this is something that we run into all the time as compositors, is we have some fringing here, okay? Now my subject was originally on a very light colored background. We did a good job cutting our subject out.
How did you cut her out? Did you just did? I don't know if you did anything magical, like select
It was
subject or
mostly
anything.
magic, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I like how you're keeping your edge. I can't show you everything. Trust me. I gotta keep the edge.
Come on. No,
this is good because I want to know how you kind of clean up those details.
Yeah. So we are going to be doing some cutouts later today, and throughout the broadcast, we're also going to show you some fantastic techniques for cutting out hair, because I know hair is super difficult to cut out. But in the last year, I've spent a lot of energy developing techniques that I feel are the best way you can use to possibly cut out hair.
Into it.
Yeah.
And didn't yesterday you said you can like grow hair? Did you say that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're going to show you in this. If we have time, we're going to do it today. If not, we'll definitely get to it tomorrow. We're going to show you how to make hair.
Yeah, I'm into it. Who wants
any type
of hair?
More hair? It's going to be
Flash
absolutely
hands.
fantastic. Which is just going to make your cutout game much stronger. So to do the cutout, just to answer your question real quick here, Paul, I'd use the pen tool to cut out the majority of my subject. And then when it came to details here in our subject's hair, I used channels, which allow you to see the difference between light and dark and make selections based on that difference. So this is kind of what you get as a rough cutout. And I'm sure a lot of us can get to this stage, right? We're here and we're like, you know what?
Yeah, I could make halos happen all day long.
Yeah, easy.
I'm good at that.
We are good at this. So this is one of those things that is a real challenge for compositors, anyone cutting someone out of their background, because you get to this point and you ask yourself the question, okay, what do I need to do next? Is this an issue with my layer mask? Is my selection off? Like, do I need to contract my layer mask? Do I need to like bring that in order to get rid of the fringing? What do I need to do here? Well, in just a few minutes, we're going to show you a fantastic technique. You don't have to do anything else to your layer mask. If you can get your layer mask to this place, I'm going to show you how to take it to the next level and completely remove this fringing in a beautiful, beautiful way. So that's one of the things we're going to focus on. The next thing we're going to take a look at here are the shadow levels of my subject, okay? Here we go. So you can see these shadow levels, or the dark levels in this case. We're looking at a relatively, it's almost like a purplish down here, okay?
Okay.
You see it's kind of looks a little, almost purple, like a very decent, like a dark gray with a tiny bit of purple.
Yeah, and I don't know how it's coming across on the stream, but yeah, you can definitely notice it on your monitor.
On my monitor. But on the stream, you'll notice that her dress is not as dark as some of the surrounding. For instance, this area of her dress is lighter than these trees here.
I don't know, was it picking up some bounce light somehow from the...
Most likely. Let's go ahead and hit shift and click on this image again. Also, this is a stock image that was colorized just a little bit before it was uploaded to a stock image website.
Okay.
So we're gonna work on that color correction as well. So we're gonna not only take care of the fringing, but we're gonna match our light levels in general, because the dress she's wearing is a black dress, right? And this black dress should be at least as dark, or even maybe a little bit darker than these dark trees here. Okay, so we're gonna show you how to analyze the difference between lights and darks and those levels. We're gonna use some interesting tools in Photoshop that are not very commonly used to analyze our light levels. That's gonna be fantastic.
Into it.
Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna show you how to create a realistic shadow underneath our subject. And creating shadows in Photoshop can be a little bit on the tricky side, but I'm gonna give you some fantastic tips that are gonna make this much, much easier. We're gonna talk about using your brush tool and the difference between opacity and flow, which, by the way, on the chat, does anyone know the difference between opacity and flow with a brush tool? I just wanna get a general census out there, because I had no idea for a long time.
Yeah, great question.
I learned, and it blew my mind, and I was like, oh, okay, totally changes how I work in Photoshop. So
what's the difference between opacity and flow?
Yeah.
And by the way, can we do something really fast?
We can do anything real fast.
This might help, but people ask about this all the time, just in order to zoom the display. That's what we want to do, because you asked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
We just turn this on. These are the keyboard shortcuts, and we can actually use these scroll gestures, right? So you just hold down Control.
Yes.
So we can do this. This is what I want to do. Zoop. When you say opacity, right, and flow, those two. So I just hold down the Control key and I go up and
Magician, this guy.
down. No, I'm good for something, yay! What's the difference between opacity and flow with the brush?
Okay, how do I unscroll out of there?
There
Just
you
like
go,
this.
buddy.
Okay, see? I'm
Sorry.
a medium
I hope that's
learner.
okay. You asked about it yesterday.
No, it's
so.
fantastic. I appreciate that. So we're gonna work with the opacity and flow and show you how to create a realistic shadow. Now, the other thing that we're gonna do with this image is we're gonna work on matching the colors from the background to our subject. So one interesting thing are we able to full screen this broadcast of us, Paco? So we can get full screen here? Like without the Photoshop background?
Of us?
Yeah, I have a little point that I want to demonstrate.
He needs to make a point.
I'd like to demonstrate a point here. And I know this is a little bit like, wah, wah, but can we turn off the chroma real quick? Is that possible?
Yeah, we could do that.
I have a point that I want to illustrate.
Wow, you're you're demystifying our what?
So
This is what it really looks like.
Yeah, surprise, we're actually not floating in a
not
wonderland
floating
here.
in space.
There's a green screen behind us. But here's the point that I want to make. When you're in an environment, every object reflects light and color from all of the objects around that object.
No, you're right.
So for instance, imagine you had like a chrome sphere, like a ball, a sphere
that's
ball.
why I was like holding this up, because this might be catching some of the
It's
green
catching
light.
some green. You can actually see it right there on the side. You can see that green. If you had a chrome sphere here, it would catch the green from the background. It would catch the colors from all around the environment. Now, the same thing is true on a subject. It might just be a little bit less pronounced.
Might
So
be really subtle.
we actually do have quite a bit on green on our skin. Can we turn that chroma key, can we re-chroma it?
Yep.
Okay, so we re-chromed it. We're back in space. It looks beautiful. But you may notice, check this out. I still have some green on my skin. Does everyone see that? Like, my skin has a slight, especially around the sides and around the edges. Does everyone see there's a slight green tint there?
Yeah.
I'm not knocking the chroma software.
I know, like, Paco's like, why you gotta do that to me?
The folks here at at
Why
Adobe
you
are
do that
doing
to
an
me?
amazing job. That's just a little bit of an example of how we actually will reflect the colors and the light in our environment. And we've got some comments. Anel says, I see it. Ahmad says, yes. Okay, so that's one thing we want to keep in mind as compositors, because if we place a subject into a new environment, they're going to need to reflect the colors of that environment as well. So if you don't have your subject with a little bit of the colors in the environment mirrored into the subject's skin, into what they're wearing, then it's simply not going to look realistic.
Yeah. No.
What do you think? Did that make sense? That little example?
Especially since you turned off the chroma key or whatever, you could actually see it definitely like on your face. You
Yeah.
notice it.
A little bit
Just ever so subtle.
Ever so
Again,
subtle.
Paco, you're a rock star, buddy.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
Good point.
So we want to keep that in mind too. So maybe we can switch back to the Photoshop screen here, and we're just gonna zoom in a little bit and kind of check out the skin tone of our subject. So we can see the skin tone of our subject is looking a little bit on the cool side. We definitely have quite a bit of red and magenta in our subject here, a little bit of desaturated red here, but we have some like blue, almost like cool highlights in my subject's skin. You can see these are like, when I say cool colors, we're talking about like blues, you know? It's appearing a little bit warmer on the broadcast itself, but we're gonna take care of that. So we have a little bit of the cool colors, especially on my subject and especially on the subject's highlights. So if I hold Shift and temporarily disable my layer mask, you can see that makes sense. She's kind of in like a cool colored environment, right? A little bit of like a very, very light blue, almost like a little bit of a purple going on in that environment. So when we place the subject into our new environment, which is primarily green,
Yeah.
she needs to reflect some of that green color in the environment in order for that to make it look real as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
All right,
sense.
so we're gonna put here color, and we'll put green as well. So I hope that little background information helped everyone kind of see what's going on in the image and pinpoint some things that we can actually change and work on to make things more realistic.
Yeah, which is why I like that you actually took her and you cut her out of another environment. Sometimes you can get stock, photography where they're already on white.
Yes.
But that's less information. Like, I feel like you had information, even though you had to cut them out, you're like, okay, she looks like she's on a dock. She might be surrounded by water. Where are the light sources kind of coming from? So you can kind of correct them in this sort of situation.
Exactly. And on that note, my suggestion, if you are planning on making a composite like this, if you're going to put a person into a new environment, I suggest photographing that person in as close of an environment as you can possibly find. So if you're gonna put a person into an image that's a cloudy day, I suggest photographing that person outside on a cloudy day. That way the light is going to be very close to the image that you're gonna put that person in.
Yeah. You know who's really good at that is Alexandria.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, she's really good at, she'll go out and she'll take pictures like of her kids or whatever, but it's like all the same environment, even different aspects of it, and then she puts it all together. She knows the lighting's right. She has less things she kind of has to deal with in Photoshop, to be honest with you.
Exactly. If you can
is
get
so
your
good.
light looking consistent, that makes most of the work, that's basically most of the work done for you.
Yeah, that's good. And we're interested. I'm glad you're doing something that's like not so easy, obviously, in this case, because this is usually the case. Having something match, and even Adriano's talking about match color adjustments, which I don't know if that's an actual selection, not match color adjustments.
There is a match color tool in Photoshop, which I will not be using for this example, but that sometimes can be a great way to match color. So now that we've kind of talked about some of the background and we've pinpointed some of the things that make this image not quite work, we're gonna go and make the image work. So let's go ahead and start off. I've got a fantastic technique here. We're gonna start off with our fringing right here around the hair. So let's go ahead and make this layer invisible. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a clipping mask. Do you know what a clipping mask is? Have you ever used that?
I do. I love it, but show everybody.
We are gonna show everybody.
It's like the best thing. Like, I think yesterday, the people that didn't know about smart objects, that was like awesome. And I think
Mind-blowing.
clipping mask is like the same level of awesomeness.
Yeah.
So nice.
Yeah, I want, when you install Photoshop for the first time, I want it to be like, oh, and by the way, here's what a clipping mask is. You're gonna love this.
Yeah, totally.
So here's what a clipping mask does. Basically, I'm gonna paint right here above this image, okay? Here we go. So you can see I'm on a new layer.
Good job.
I'm a fantastic painter, thank you. I'm on a new layer, and
You're clearly a professional. No, just joking.
I've painted above my subject and the background. Now, if I want this layer to only be visible where my subject is visible, I can use a clipping mask to do so. So what we're gonna do, it's very simple to do. We're gonna simply right-click here on our layer, and we're gonna go to Create Clipping Mask. There we go. Now, as soon as I create the clipping mask, you can see because my subject's already cut out, as soon as I create my clipping mask, now this layer is only visible where my subject is.
That actually is kind of cool.
You can see I can move it around very, very easily. It's an incredibly cool way to basically create a mask without actually masking.
Yeah, into it. And then just, I wanted to point out what the layer panel looks like, those layers over there.
Yeah, let's
do it. Two fingers up.
Oh boy.
Boop. And you could still move your mouse into, there you go.
There we go.
Move it over.
Move it over.
There you go.
It's pretty cool. I'm enjoying these tips and tricks here. So when you create a layer mask, it kind of bumps it over to the side and you get this little down arrow here. So if you see that, you are working with the clipping mask. Now the fantastic thing about clipping masks is you can clip an unlimited amount of layers. So I could have many, many different layers that are all clipped to my subject. To unclip, you simply right click and then there we go. You would just go down to Release Clipping Mask. And here you can see.
And for the pros out there, what's the shortcut for making clipping mask?
On a Mac, it's gonna be Option Command G.
Or you can go to, you can actually do a, is it Option Command G? Hold down just Option.
Just hold down Option.
Like this is, sorry, we'll switch to me real fast. Like right over here, as I scroll over,
yeah.
If I hold down Option key, and it's, if you roll over between the lines,
yes.
Option key, boop,
boop, boop, beep, bop, boop. That works too. Yeah, so. Fantastic. Fantastic. So we've got a couple of great keyboard shortcuts to get that done. Now let's just do one more little example. I'm gonna go ahead and clip that. We're gonna create a new layer. I'm gonna use my brush tool, change our color real quick. So we got a little darker color, and Option Command G clip that as well. So you can see I can have multiple layers clipped to the same object. Now, these clipping masks are a key to reducing things like fringing.
Okay.
So here's what we're gonna do. Let's go ahead and just delete those layers. We're gonna start with a new layer. Now, zooming back into my subject, I'm just gonna do a very little quick example, and then we're gonna refine this and make it a little bit better. So in this case, I'm just gonna use my brush tool. So let's just hit B for the brush tool. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option to sample this brown color from hair, and I'm just gonna paint it right outside here. Okay, just paint it right outside my subject's hair. There we go. You can see.
Right along that edge?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna do a better job in just a second, but I'm showing you like the idea, the principle here. We're just painting brown right along that edge. It's not clipped to my subject right now, it's just on a regular new layer. Now let's go ahead and clip this and see what it does. Option Command G, now that brown is covering up the fringing.
Nice.
So that's the idea. Now in this case, I use the brush tool, which is why it doesn't look super real, because it just is the brush tool. But let's try it again. Now we're gonna use the clone stamp tool instead. So I'm gonna hit S for our clone stamp tool. We're gonna make sure we're sampling.
Can you just tell me that shortcut? How you showed the red, the size of the brush?
Oh gosh, that's the best.
Yeah, by all means.
So I got a couple keyboard shortcuts here that I do suggest we write these down. Paco, are you able to put these on screen, by the way? Like
I could write them down.
You could write them down? I just want everyone to know these keyboard shortcuts because they're just fantastic.
Paul will write it, we can switch to the screen.
Yeah.
Paul will write it, okay. So the first keyboard shortcut that I want everyone to know that's gonna change the way you work is hold down your space bar, okay? Space bar, and then if you're on a Mac, it's gonna be Command. If you're on a PC, it's gonna be Control. So space bar, and then Control or Command, and you can click in and out to zoom in to a specific place in your image. This is very helpful because you can see your image as a whole. If you need to zoom into a particular place, you just simply click at that place and then drag to the right to zoom in, drag to the left to zoom out. So I can see my image as a whole easily, and if I need to work on my subject's hair, I just click and drag, and I can zoom right to the exact amount that I want into my subject's hair. So that's the first keyboard shortcut, very, very helpful. The next one is with the brush tool. And with the brush tool, we're gonna hold, I'm on a Mac, so it's gonna be Control and Option, and we're gonna click and drag from the right to the left. That's gonna make our brush larger and smaller. Now if I go up and down, it's gonna make my brush harder and softer. So I can create a very large, hard edge brush. I can create a small, soft edge brush, vice versa. It's incredibly easy to do. Allows me to see my brush preview. Very, very helpful. Now, if you're on a PC, the keyboard shortcut is going to be Control and Alt, and then right click and drag. So write those down. I know Paul's kind of writing those down too. Super, super helpful. They should help you out whenever working in Photoshop. Now that's gonna work with the brush. It will also work with other tools like the healing brush tool and the clone stamp tool.
Okay, nice.
So in this case, let's go ahead and grab our clone stamp tool. We're gonna hit S for the clone stamp tool. I'm gonna sample an area here of our subject's hair, and then we're gonna simply paint that sampled area right back. Same idea, what we were doing earlier with the brush tool. Now we're just doing this with a clone stamp. So I'm just clone stamping outside, right over top of that fringing. That's kind of my goal right there, is just cover up this fringing. Now, again, all I have to do is hit Option Command G or clip that, and look at that.
Nice.
We have hair that extends outside into the clipped area. So we're just gonna kind of...
I love that it's non-destructive.
Non-destructive, exactly. Yeah, I'm a big fan, you know, anytime I can do non-destructive editing, I highly suggest editing non-destructive, because you can just go back and change things whenever you'd like. So we're just gonna go a little bit further here, kind of finish this out. Now, obviously this is a live demonstration, so some of these things we're just gonna like, you know, do a relatively summarized version of to simply save time. But you can see by simply sampling the hair from the inside and painting out, we are essentially removing the fringing on the subject's hair. So this, while we may have originally thought was possibly an issue with our layer mask, now we're seeing that we're able to completely take away this fringing issue simply through using clipping masks and a little bit of clone stamp. Just want to clone stamp, you know, to make sure it's kind of the right value for wherever you're clone stamping. See, here's the hair's a little bit darker, so we're gonna just sample that.
That's so good, because I think most examples I see is all about trying to choke that hair, you know, like choke it away.
Yes.
And then it just looks very like she doesn't wash her hair, and it's all matted and not natural.
I agree. I agree. It can look very unnatural, and it will also just not be. It'll be a less accurate selection of the hair. So this is a fantastic technique. Let's just go ahead and zoom out here. We'll just do a tiny bit of cleanup here.
As somebody said in chat, she's unimpressed with that. Like, she's just like...
I think she's kind of unimpressed with
us
in general.
Most things. It's not just you. Don't worry about it.
So let's go ahead and take a look at our before and after here. We're gonna just turn this layer off. Now, it's non-destructive. You can turn it off, you can turn it on, you can add more. So let's just turn this off. We can see there's our fringing. We're gonna turn it back on, and our fringing is completely taken care of.
What? Looks so good. And she's happy. She's like, wow,
she is happy.
My hair
I'm
is
gonna
looking
liquefy
great.
her a little smile here. So let's go ahead and zoom out and see how it looks from this level. We can turn that off and back on, and you can see it's a fantastic fix for fringing issues. So if you get to the point where you've cut your subject out, their hair is cut out, but you're seeing a lot of fringing, this is a fantastic technique that should save you quite a bit of time and help your images look more realistic.
That's great, and it looks like it's helping Julia. She was cutting out hair today as well. She had to mask hair. which is awesome. Well, Julia, I hope you win. I hope I'd love to give away as many of these as I can, but we're going to dive into Chat and Win right now. Welcome back, everyone. This is Chat and Win. So all you need to do is enter something in chat. Preferably, we need some legible words. We basically need to know that there's a human at the other end of that keyboard. So when we say potentially your name, you can respond and you know. So basically be like, hey, what's up?
Hi, what's up?
Yeah, hi, what's up?
Preferably something about Paul's sweater here.
No, we were talking about this earlier. We're very much Hawaii, where you're originally from.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Hawaii, for anyone who may not know that.
Yeah, born and raised in Hawaii, and I'm Colorado. So
Colorado.
Hawaii and Colorado.
We are representing our states. That's the new precedent of Adobe live broadcasts.
I thought it was pretty funny. We're like
Wear
staying true to where we're from.
Yeah. Wear a shirt that represents where you're from.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious. People probably are doing that and they don't even know it. You know, so we will draw a name at random.
Beep boop beep boop 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 beep boop.
Hello. Ooh, I like that. And congratulations to Isha D. As you can see, Isha D. You have won. What have you won? You've won all my electrical bills for a year. No, you didn't.
That's so nice of you.
No, I'm just joking. You've won Moo, a $30 Moo credit, basically. So you can get anything printed up at moo.com. Because they're friends of ours, and you can create beautiful, expertly crafted business materials or fun, like holiday materials, right?
Yeah.
With Christmas rolling around.
I love
Make
Moo.
that fancy.
They just like totally changed the game with
really,
their business cards.
Yeah.
Like remember early back in the day where it's like you saw one person with Moo cards and they had different like photos of theirs on every card.
And they were like somewhere like Square or something, and you're like, wow, you had to go to, we went to an awesome place, didn't you?
You go right home and order them for yourself, which is...
They revolutionized the game. That's pretty interesting.
So you guys are going to love that gift card.
And by the way, just a quick shout out for all of you that didn't win. We do have a discount. So if you do /Adobe Live, you can get 15 discount. It should be about 15% off. So that's for you. Boom, Tim is on it. Thank you, Tim.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Tim.
I need some new business cards. Maybe I'll order them after this broadcast.
Yeah, I want to. And just hand them out to people.
Let's get back into our image.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Our job's easy. We're like, entertain us, Aaron. Show us more magic. And I'm curious about the flowers too. Is another
same
tough
deal.
little.
Same deal. So you would think, okay, flowers are gonna be tough, but you know what? Kind of same deal here. So sometimes you have a good area to sample, like in the hair, for instance. We had quite a bit of hair to sample from with our clone stamp tool, right? Sometimes you don't really have as much of a sample area. For instance, if I want to clean up this little fringing around the little flower here, I find it's better to use the brush tool. So we're gonna use our brush tool. I'm gonna hold Alt or Option and sample that little color there.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna paint it right up here. And there we go. Now I got a little pro tip for any brush tool fanatics out there. We're gonna go to Window and down to Brush Settings. I love what I'm about to say to you. I think you're going to love it, rather.
I love it.
I love my own advice.
No, I like it when you're like, I'm really into this tip that I'm about. I'm like, I'm into it.
Oh, I am really into this. This is an incredible, incredible thing that will help your brushing look a little bit more natural by adding some variation into it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn on color dynamics here. So let's go into our color dynamics. Now, at default, let's just go ahead and bring everything down to 0.
I love it. Okay,
it's gonna be fantastic. So if I have everything down to 0, when I paint, it's just gonna look like this, okay? Paint and paint, it's gonna look like that. Let me just create a new layer so I can do this example here. Now, if I bring my brightness jitter up just a little bit, you can see that as I paint, I've got a little bit of a different color that's kind of coming down. Now I have one more option here, apply per tip. So I can uncheck that, and when I paint one brush stroke, it's gonna be that color. Another is gonna be darker. So each time it's just a little bit different, and I'm not choosing this, okay? This is being generated randomly by Photoshop. Now,
How did you get this jitter down here, by the way?
this is just if you go apply
Oh,
per tip.
Per tip. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. That's the
Per tip. Yes, it's gonna look like that. Now you can also introduce things like hue jitter. So it's gonna have a slightly different hue every time we paint. You can see we're just got a different hue, and saturation jitter and things like that. But in this case, we're gonna use a brightness jitter, okay? And we have the choice as to whether we want to do a per tip or not. And that's gonna be different depending on what you're painting. Okay, so what we're gonna do, let's go ahead and just delete that. We're gonna go ahead and clip this layer. Now, we're using our brightness jitter, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull some of these colors here and kind of do my painting. But as I'm painting, our brightness jitter is taking over, and it's giving me natural variation here. You see, it's not all the same color that I'm painting. So with the marigold, for instance, or these little flowers here, rather, as I paint on, because I'm pretty far zoomed in and I'm using a relatively small brush, the natural variation of the color dynamics is making it look like natural variation of the flowers themselves. So for instance, let's go ahead and grab this color. We're gonna just paint around the edge, and you can see this natural color variation in the brush is actually replicating what might be color variation in the object itself. So just a fantastic technique when you're using the brush tool. If you're in small detail areas like this, you don't want to just paint with the same color over and over again, because it's just simply not going to look realistic. But if you start to bring in other colors into the mix, you're gonna notice you're gonna get a much more realistic result. It's very easy to do this. It doesn't require any additional work. There we go. And you're gonna see your results look much more natural. Let's just turn this off and on. So let's take a look at the top of this little like flower here that we painted. We'll just turn that off. There's all of our fringing. We're gonna turn that back on, and you can see, you see the natural color variation there? It just simply looks as though
Yeah, love it.
we have some like nature, in other words, you know, like that color variation is just being a little bit more true to form. Now, I'm not gonna continue on with the whole rest of it just for to save a little bit of time, but you get the idea. So you would just, you know, simply sample colors that are not in the fringe and then paint right over, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I love it. And if you want even, I like how you have more control if you wanted to do the foreground and background.
Exactly.
Like kind of toggling between two colors.
Yes.
Is kind of nice.
Most definitely, most definitely. And right now, I'm simply working with just a regular soft round brush here. You can also, and I'd love to do a tutorial on brushes sometime. If you ever have a brush tool week on Adobe, please invite me back, because I could fill a whole week with using the brush tool.
Kyle T. Webster.
Oh yeah. In this case, I'm using a soft round brush, but you could most definitely make a brush that would look a little bit more organic as well. Maybe with some like kind of rougher edges, and that would also do a fantastic job with this.
Can I show you mine?
Please do.
So I just cranked up the hue jitter because I thought it would be fun.
That is fun.
I used one of Kyle's brushes, and now it's just like, oh, the beautiful paint splats, which is, again, this is kind of fun.
I'm digging it. It is a lot of fun. You can do some fantastic effects with brushes.
Which, looking at this, you're like, that, you had to click, no, you didn't have to click and select and paint and click and select. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you did almost no work.
Which is pretty typical in my case.
I mean, I think if you can take something like that and simplify it, that's a fantastic way to work.
It looks like it's just magical.
Magic. So I hope everyone has enjoyed those couple of examples there. I'm just gonna make sure to turn off color dynamics once more, so when I use my brush in the future, we don't have that those same brush settings applied. There we are. Let's go ahead and dock that back. Let's close it out. So again, I'm not gonna finish this area just for time's sake, but let's go ahead and take a look at our before and after for what we have done so far, and you can see we've completely taken care of our fringing. Now, those techniques continue to work around your subject. You can see we have just a slight little light area around some of the areas of my subject. You can see this sort of thing. See that little slight light area? Easy, just grab your brush tool, sample that color, and paint right there. Boom, we just took care of that fringing.
Into it. And again, on that separate layer.
On a separate layer, incredibly easy to do. You can turn this off and on. And getting rid of that fringing will take you a big way in making these images look more realistic. Okay, fantastic. So we've taken care of our fringing. The next thing we want to do is take a look at our light levels in our image. And for this, I have a fantastic tip. We're gonna be using a adjustment layer that almost never gets used. So I'm always excited to figure out uses for obscure tools in Photoshop. We're gonna be using the threshold adjustment layer. Have you ever used it?
Never.
Never.
I've been working in Photoshop forever, never used threshold.
Never used threshold. It's a fantastic adjustment layer for exactly what I'm gonna show you.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and grab our adjustment layer. We're gonna go to
used it.
threshold. We're gonna go to threshold. Okay. Now, you see threshold and you're like, okay.
That looks cool, by the way.
It does kind of look cool. You see threshold and immediately you're like, okay, well, that's not exactly what I want for this photo. I don't think I'm ever gonna use that. Now, the deal with threshold here is that I'm not going to apply this to my image. This is not going to make my image, I don't want the black and white effect on my image. We're using threshold here as an analysis tool to analyze our light levels.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and check this out because it's incredibly cool. When you use threshold, let's just
I love
drag.
it though. I've never really played with this and it's so cool.
It's so cool. So when we drag our threshold out, basically you got one point here in your threshold slider. If I drag this to the right, my image gets a little bit darker. To the left, my image gets lighter. And this point makes everything to the right of it white and everything to the left black. So let's just go ahead and make my subject invisible real quick. We'll just turn our subject off and we're gonna move our threshold, and you can use this to see how light travels through your image, which is incredibly interesting. So we can see at this point,
almost where the source is coming from, kinda?
You can analyze the source of your light using threshold. So I can see as I go off here to the right that these are the lightest pixels in my image, in this case, okay? Lightest pixels in my image, that's telling me where my light source is. And as I bring this from the right to the left, I have a natural opening of light into my scene, starting from the back and moving its way forward. And as I move over here, now I have an idea of the darkest darks in my image. Okay, so a fun analysis tool for images in general. Now, this really helps when you're doing compositing, and here's why. I'm gonna turn my subject back on. As we saw, we had a very nice gradual shift in light in our background. When we put our new subject into that image, we know we have a good composite if that gradual light shift still exists with our subject in there. So let's take a look. We're gonna bring our image to the right here. And now I'm right about here, and check this out, okay? My forest and all my foreground area, that's all really dark, right? But if I turn my subject on, look at that highlight in her shoulder.
Okay, that seems, yeah, should it be there?
It's too bright.
Yeah.
It's too bright, right? The highlight in my subject's shoulder is too bright right now. Look, it's almost as bright as the sky. It's still visible there. My whole foreground is gone. But if I turn my subject back on, we can see the highlight in my subject's shoulder is still visible, making it basically almost as bright as the sky.
Yeah.
So we're analyzing the light of my subject as compared to the light of my background. Now, as I bring this to the left, this is starting to look okay, but then we can see here already, there should be a shadow there, right? And as I bring this to the left, you're gonna see my subject starts to disappear, and then look, she's gone. But keep in mind, she's wearing a black dress, right? So that black dress disappears before these dark brown trees, telling me that the black dress is too light because it should still be there with the darks in my image.
Yeah, should like at the same level. Good thing you have that tree like kind of the same
Exactly.
plane.
Exactly. So we're using some of the image to give us little cues and clues on how that works. So if you've done your composite well, let me just move the image here so everyone can see. If you've done your composite well, moving from left to the right with your threshold should look completely natural, as though it would look if you were just using one photograph. Okay.
Jan Eric, does this only work with certain images with receding light?
No, it works on every image in every case. No matter how complex your composite is, you can do this compositing hundreds of different images together and analyze the light with those images.
And that's kind of why you'd use it. It's like, where is the light coming from? Where are the strongest points? This kind of helps you
exactly
figure that out.
And not only that, but you want to make sure that the highlights and shadows of your subject are relatively similar to the highlights and shadows of your background. In other words, if my subject has highlights that are brighter than my background, that doesn't make sense, right? Because my background is lighting the subject.
Yeah, how's it brighter?
How would it be brighter unless it's a light source, right? If my subject's shadows are darker than my entire image, that's not gonna make sense either, so I need to lighten those up a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, it's incredibly easy to do this. All we have to do is use levels to work on our light and dark.
This is already helping me out because I have this composite and I'm already noticing the problems with it.
Can we switch back to your screen? Maybe you can tell me, did you do this composite, by the way?
Yeah. Yeah, so.
I'm so excited when this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, because I've always had a problem with like, oh, she's not quite right. She doesn't quite fit in there, I don't think. And then I added threshold, like you said, and then started adjusting it. And like right here, I feel like that dress, I know it's white, but I still think it's just, she's too bright.
Too bright.
She's too bright, and that's kind of clearly what this, I mean, look at that. What, this
Her
is the
dress
brightest
is the brightest thing in the image.
Yeah.
Which it's very hard to see that with your eyes. You know, very difficult to see with your eyes. So this is why I love the threshold adjustment layer, because it makes these things that are difficult to see with your eyes, it makes them obvious.
Yeah.
Because as compositors and as artists, there's a lot to keep in mind and a lot to work with here. So using these tools helps us out and makes these things look more realistic. So I'll go ahead and show you how to fix that as well.
Yeah, please do.
What we're gonna do, let's work on our light levels first. So let's go ahead and take this to the right. We're seeing that the light levels of our subject are just a little bit too bright. Okay, so we're gonna turn that off real quick. Just turn the threshold off. What I'm gonna do is grab a levels adjustment layer. Okay, now again, we wanna make sure we clip this, right? Because if I do any change here, it's gonna be visible for my entire image. But if I clip this, it's only visible where my subject is. So now I can start to match the subject in the background. So let's just undo that. So again, my light levels are a little bit too bright. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my white point and just bring it down just a little bit, see? Just a little bit.
Take off that edge.
Just take my white point just down a little bit, and then we turn our threshold back on, and then we see what we're looking like. Okay, it still looks a tiny bit too bright.
Because you could actually work on levels. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, yeah.
Fantastic.
Threshold on.
We just turn that right back off. And a subtle change that you might not even have known to do. Look, if I turn this back on and off, you can see she starts to fit in that environment a little bit better.
Yeah, I knew it. Already looks a lot better.
We're gonna do the same thing with our shadows. So let's do another levels adjustment layer. We're gonna turn threshold back on here. Okay, and keep in mind, her dress is black, right? So we want it to still be black. We want it to still show up with the shadows of this image. So it should be showing up right about here, because this is very dark areas of my background. That black should be showing up. So we're gonna take our black point and simply drag that from the left to the right. So we're gonna take this point here. And you can actually see this becomes pretty obvious. I'm gonna use Paul's trick here. This becomes pretty obvious. Look, I really don't even have much black information in the image of my subject, because this is a stock image and because our subject was probably color toned beforehand, removing some of those blacks. So what we're gonna do is simply take our black point and move it. There we go. And now we're starting to see those shadows are showing up. There we go. And we kind of want to make sure that they, I say like decay or disappear at about the same time, okay? So as it's going away, you can see how her dress just disappeared right there, but we still have some shadow there. I want her dress to like still be a tiny bit visible there, and then I want it to disappear with these shadows. So we're just gonna take our black point here, raise it up a couple. See, we have a little bit left of her and a little bit left of our background, and look, they disappear at pretty much the same time, right? So now you can see we have our shadow levels kind of coming in here and filling in. Now she doesn't have a shadow, that's why this doesn't look super realistic. There's no shadow just yet, but those dark levels are starting to come in at the right place. Let's turn that levels adjustment layer off and see how this looks. See all of that dark in our environment and then she comes in? That doesn't make any sense. So we're gonna make sure that she starts to come in with the environment. Maybe I just lower that down just a little bit. Okay, so now her dark levels, maybe we'll just go down a little bit more. There we go. Her dark levels are starting to match my image as a whole. So we can see the dark levels here and the dark levels there. So let's just turn those off. And we can kind of see, here's our little before image. We'll turn those back on and that becomes our after. And you can see the dark levels here are simply matching our background a little bit better. I'm gonna just turn this down just a little bit there. There we go. And we're looking fantastic. Obviously we have some shadow work to do here, but
yeah,
already matching much better.
Yeah, and I think you've identified like the two things that are like clear giveaways for composite, which is the blacks don't match up, and the highlights is something I'm learning right now.
Definitely,
as well, you know,
definitely, yeah.
You notice that in movies too. If it's some sort of render or something, and it's too rich for the realistic scene that they shot.
Yes, definitely, definitely. Yeah, welcome. With my compositing mind, I see stuff like that all the time, and I'm like, yeah. I wish I could help you. So I'm on to my next little tip here. On to our next tip, and if you've never used this one, Paul, and the folks out there, I think you are going to absolutely love this tip. I call it check layers. Now, threshold falls into that. Okay, so we made that threshold layer to check what's going on in our image. I'm not actually gonna leave it on there, right? That's not a permanent addition to my image. It's just on there to check what's going on. Now, there are some other check layers that can really help with compositing.
I think Jimmy Mitchell talks about sort of the crispness of images, which could be considered a check as well.
That's most definitely a check. Yeah, that's most definitely a check, and we can show you how to analyze that as well.
And I think where you're going with this next one, is it color-based?
It is the lack of color.
Ooh.
It's actually just a black and white adjustment layer. Okay, so a black and white adjustment layer can tell you a lot about your image. Putting your image in black and white just takes...
Stop making it look so good regardless of what you do, because it just looks awesome. Threshold and black and white, so yeah, into it.
Perfect. So black and white just takes color out of the mix, right? So it's easy to analyze light levels when you're just looking at your image in black and white. So I highly recommend when you're doing your compositing, it's a fantastic idea to look at your image in black and white, because you get an idea. Like if I just turn these levels adjustment layers off, like remember we made these two levels adjustment layers due to our threshold. If I turn them off, then it becomes pretty obvious that we have a light level issue, right?
Yeah.
If I turn them back on, we're looking a little bit better. I'm just gonna lower the opacity of that one just a little bit. So looking at your image in black and white can help out quite a bit. And again, if this is a composite that I'm gonna work on to completion, which we have some other fantastic examples, so we're gonna do both, but if I were to do this to completion, I would bring some of the light from behind my subject and wrap it around.
Yes.
We talked about this earlier in the broadcast, how some of the green will wrap around your image. Let's show you how to do that with light. It's incredibly easy to do. We're just gonna create a levels adjustment layer. There we go. Let's go ahead and clip that. Just make this brighter. Okay, a little bit brighter there. Now, right now, this levels adjustment layer is just visible everywhere. We don't necessarily want that, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna take our layer mask and we're gonna invert that layer mask. And then I'm gonna take my brush tool and we're just gonna simply add some light.
Just a little spill. Like
Just a
light
little bit of spill.
around.
Because you get it with color, you also get it with light. A little bit of light is just kind of gonna spill around the sides of your subject and wrap your subject in a little bit of light. There we go. So let's just turn that off and on. You can see that. Let's just zoom in a little bit more so you can see that. We're just gonna turn that off and on and see how that little bit of spill of light can just help make that composite look a little bit more realistic. So you have a little bit of light kind of coming around your subject from the background. And these sort of things, I find it's very helpful to do this when looking at your image in black and white, because again, at this point, you're just analyzing light. So making that invisible again, we can see here, she kind of doesn't fit. The lighting on her is just a tiny bit flat compared. We turn this back on and look at that. It looks as though the light from the background is wrapping around our subject. And again, because this is clipped to my subject, it's only gonna show up where my subject is, which is fantastic. Okay, so that's very helpful to look at your image in black and white. And we're gonna do this when we create the shadow, but we're not there just yet. Now, my next tip, did you see that by the way, Paul?
Oh, sorry.
That before and after with putting a little bit of light wrap on the subject?
Yeah, you were painting with white on that black layer mask, basically, right?
Yeah. Just masking that in and it's clipped to my subject.
I love how you've been working. You have not like touched the pixels of that image. It's all done in layers that you can toggle on and off.
Oh, yeah. So I'm a huge fan of non-destructive editing. In my opinion, every image you edit in Photoshop, you should be able to go back to the original photograph with one click. Okay?
Would you? Are there some? I would sometimes look at this and people would use maybe a dodge or a burn or something like that, which again is destructive. But
yeah.
you're sometimes like, I'm doing this, therefore I'm not going to use these tools over here.
Yeah. In fact, I would steer clear of the dodge tool and burn tool in general. I would suggest instead using curves and levels to make things brighter and darker, and then mask them in. That would be my suggestion.
Cool.
I just made like a 5-hour tutorial on dodging and burning. It's on PHLEARN.com right now. It's called How to Master Dodge and Burn in Photoshop. It's honestly, I did a super deep dive into dodge and burn and just tried to like find the best way to do it. And we just released a tutorial on it. So we're sharing some of those techniques today.
Awesome. This might be a dumb question, but dodge and burn, do you have to work on the actual pixels or can you work on a layer above?
You can work on a layer above.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
You can work on, and
That's awesome.
you can do some really cool stuff too.
Okay.
Like for instance, you can do dodging and burning, and then you can use additional tools like apply image, which we're gonna show you how to do that in just a minute. You can use those tools to only apply those to the highlights. So let's say I want to dodge, but then I wanna paint in where I wanna dodge, but then I wanna additionally restrict that just to the highlights of the original image. You can use tools like apply image
Wow.
to do so.
Wow.
It's an incredible technique. We're gonna show you guys how to do something similar with coloring in just a minute here.
I'm into it. Like, honestly, we have a lot of guests in, and I think I know a lot, but I'm learning so much from you.
I'm so excited.
Another level of
I'm so
learning.
excited.
Because sometimes I'm
fantastic
like,
to
oh
hear.
yeah, that's interesting. When I'm like, yeah, I've known that. But I'm like legitimately like freaking learning.
That is
Good.
so exciting.
I think everybody's like, this really is a deep dive.
I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Nell says, right?
Okay.
This is good.
So let's go ahead and show you our next check layer, which is gonna be a fantastic tool again for someone. Yeah,
Jimmy.
Comments are amazing.
Jimmy's hilarious. It's so funny.
Yeah, to answer your question, Jimmy, I have no recollection of anything before.
Before 5 years of age.
Yeah,
or something,
yeah.
Right? Like, he has no idea.
Yeah, where am I right now? I have no
just-
idea.
He just.
So we've used 2 check layers as of now. We used one check layer to analyze our general light levels. That's our threshold. Now we're using a black and white to kind of refine that light level.
So you're kind of
refine our
like
look.
introducing grays, kind of. If you will,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. We're just taking a look. Here's the deal. If your composite works in black and white, then you have a chance of it working in color. However, if your black and white, if your composite image does not look realistic in black and white, it will never look realistic in color. So I always recommend starting your composites in black and white because that will help you get your light levels correct. And once you're done with your light levels, then you can start working on color.
Yeah, into it.
Okay.
By the way, hopefully you're taking all these tips and applying them to the challenge. We have that challenge submission deadline. That's that little clock on the other side of us over there. And yeah, so we'll like hopefully take what you've said and like given them advice based on what's submitted. It's our chance to hear from you on like their specific work.
Yeah,
so that's
and we get to
chance.
review and watch your images. This is gonna be fantastic.
Into it.
I've got a couple more check layers that I think you're gonna really like.
I know.
You're like, yeah, yes, please,
I've
let's do
actually
it.
been doing everything you said over here. And
With
like
your
seeing-
image.
Oh yeah, and it's clearly, I'm noticing still like the edits I need to make.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Things I did not know
These
about.
are just here to help you, help you on your journey. Compositing involves a lot of very nuanced things, and anything that you can do to kind of exaggerate those differences is gonna help you out. So,
Good call. Victor says same goes for a logo as well. Like if it doesn't work in black and white, it won't work in color. That's huge.
I completely agree, Victor.
Yeah.
Good call. Good call. So let's go ahead and delete our black and white adjustment layer. We don't need it for now. The next thing we're gonna do is our next check layer. I'm gonna create a solid color fill layer, and we're just gonna go all the way up to a very, very bright saturated color here. Okay, now with this solid color fill layer, I'm gonna change my layer blend mode from normal. First, we're gonna go down to hue. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Changing your solid color fill layer to hue, what this is going to do is it's gonna make everything in our image the same hue. Okay, so the greens in the background, the orange in my subject's skin, everything is now the same hue. So when your entire image is the same hue, what you can see is relative saturation levels in the image itself. For instance, let's just go ahead and give an example here. Let's go ahead and increase the saturation of my subject, because this happens all the time too, okay? You bring in your subject, everything looks great, maybe you don't even notice that she's too saturated, but then you do something like this, and it becomes immediately obvious that your subject is too saturated, right? Because this layer that makes everything the same hue, okay?
Yeah.
Now you're not looking at the differences in hue, you're only looking at saturation and lightness in this case. Does that make sense?
Love it. Yeah, I love how you're introducing all of this, like one step at a time.
Yeah, take
into
it step by
Like
step.
we're talking about the hue, the intensity of the color, and
The
it doesn't
intensity of the
matter
color.
what the color is.
It doesn't matter. But that's the thing, is they need to match relatively, right? Again, an object will reflect the light and the colors in that environment. So if you bring in a photo that's very saturated and you put it into a background that doesn't have much saturation, it's not going to look real because your saturation levels are going to be too different. So it's a fantastic idea to simply lower the saturation of that object to help that match a little bit better. Okay, now
another check layer, right?
it's another check layer. Now in this case, and you can try it on your
Yeah,
image
I'm
to
going
see
to.
if possibly you notice some saturation. Let's see.
Oh, I'm sure I've screwed up some things.
Let's see it work
just go through
on your
this.
image to see. So yeah, just a solid
Solid
color.
color.
You just want to grab a super saturated color there, and then
And
set it to hue. Make sure you turn your black
This is
and white.
a new feature, by the way.
Yeah, it's
is
a really
rolling
nice
over
feature in
and a
CC
boop, boop,
2019.
boop, boop,
So go ahead and set it to hue, and make sure you turn off your black and white adjustment layer.
boop. Nice.
So see, on a complex composite here, all right, what we're seeing already here, see that blue on the fish here? Or sorry, that's not blue. See this color here? Very, very saturated, right?
Yeah.
More saturated than the surrounding colors, okay? So this is telling, by looking at this, we're like, the saturation here is a little too high. The same with these fish here as well. Little bit too saturated as compared to our background. Now, are these fish on their own layer? If you simply would you be able to do it? If you simply take the saturation down of those fish, instantly your composite is going to look more realistic. If you just take that saturation down.
I have a bunch of crazy layers.
Oh, a bunch of stuff on there.
Yeah.
And can you see now how that blue fish right here that we just pointed out?
Oh man.
See how saturated it is compared to the rest of the things? Hard to see, but if you turn that layer back on, those things become very easy to see.
Yeah, look at how much that's popping right there.
Yeah, yeah, see?
Compared to everything else.
Big saturation jump there. And even the subject's skin and the shadows in the subject's skin and what's going on in the ground. This is another interesting thing here too, is the sky and the ground, is that the same image?
Yeah, pretty much.
Pretty much the same image there. Okay, got it. And did you enhance the saturation?
There's a little bit of other sky in there, but that's the original.
That's the original image. Okay, got it.
Look at how bright those are too, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm embarrassed.
Don't be embarrassed. This sort of thing is very difficult to do. And
you
you just learned about check layers.
I did. Like immediately applying what I've just learned. So this is good.
Yeah, look at that. Immediately already.
Even this one, like right over here.
Yeah, already a help.
And I think did you mention this yesterday about dropping the opacity down, like to make it blend, the opacity of a layer?
Yeah, sometimes if it's a little bit too much, I'll just drop the opacity down just a little bit. Usually not I wouldn't drop the opacity of an object like this. What I would do is drop the opacity of something like a levels adjustment layer if it was too strong.
Gotcha.
But what you can do here, if you want to work on this, like, okay, this fish, for instance, something that's really cool we could do is we're going to create a new layer, okay? I'm going to grab our brush tool. We'll just go to a regular soft round brush here, okay? And we're going to work as though our sky is obscuring a little bit of the color of the fish, okay?
Ooh.
So I painted over the fish with the sky color, okay? Option Command G, we're just going to clip that so it's only visible on the fish. And then this is a case in which you would want to lower the opacity here to like 20, 30%, and see how they start to like go into the sky a little bit more. It looks as though light from the sky is interacting with that object. So you wouldn't necessarily want to do an opacity shift on the fish themselves. So like this fish has a lower opacity. The problem there is you can kind of see through the fish, right?
Yeah.
So what you would want to do is bring the opacity of the fish back up to 100 and then create a new layer above that. You want to clip that layer, grab some of this color, paint over your fish with this color, and then you want to lower the opacity of that layer until they start to blend in. And the deal here too is the fish that's farther away, you want that to be slightly less visible than the fish that's closer. So you find that balance there, and you can see here there's that before and the after, and you can see they start to look like they're in that sky a little bit more because we've taken some of the atmosphere of the sky and put it right over top of that fish.
Yeah, into it. I love it.
Yeah, anytime you're working with sky or water, you really want to make sure that some of that atmospheric color is going to be coming over top of that object.
Yeah, especially considering where they're at in that plane too. Like
Where they're at in the plane.
Like further back.
Where they're at in that plane. Exactly.
Very
So
cool.
if we pop on that black and white adjustment layer again here, sorry to just like totally take over your image. Other things that we can analyze here are things like contrast, okay? So we can see now the contrast of these fish is a little bit lower, which kind of matches what's going on in the background, right? By contrast, by the way, everyone, I mean the difference between light and dark. So if your brights are very bright and your darks are very dark, you have a high contrast image. The closer you get those two together, if your lights come a little bit darker and your darks come a little bit lighter, you have less contrast. So the closer you have to gray, less contrast. Further away from gray, more contrast. So looking at this, now you can see this fish has a little bit less contrast and it's starting to work with the image a little bit less, or sorry, a little bit more. Now we move into things like, here is a very high contrast area. So we could in fact lower the contrast of our subject In fact, we can bring my highlights down and my shadows up, which will reduce the contrast and make them look a little bit more like they're in the environment.
How would you do that?
So let's do the turtle, because that's another fantastic example here. Let's see if we can find the turtle.
Should be down below her.
Down below here.
There you go.
Here we go. Okay, so here's our turtle. Yes, and it looks like we may have some highlights above our. There we go. The turtle is 2 layers. Do you mind if I just turn this into a smart object real quick? You can always come back and there we go. So now those 2 turtle layers become 1 turtle layer. So to reduce the contrast of this turtle, you can do this in a number of ways. Easy way to do this is with a brightness/contrast adjustment layer that's clipped to your subject, and then you simply lower the contrast. There we go. So you can see higher contrast it looks like it's standing out too much. Lower contrast, it looks like it's fitting in just a little bit, right? Yep. Now another way you can do this, let's just go undo, because what a brightness contrast does is basically just works with the levels. So you can use brightness contrast if that makes sense to you. You can also just use levels, and in your levels, okay, we're gonna take our black point and I'm gonna drag that up to the right a little bit. This is the darkest point in my image. In this case, it's clipped, right? So it's the darkest point in my image, which we're simply making a little bit lighter, okay? And my lightest point in my image, I can then make a little bit darker. So if I really want to, it gives you a lot of control. And if I really want to reduce the contrast a lot, we get something like this. This is, for instance, if we wanted this turtle to look like they were very far away, you would want a very low contrast here, probably even, even lower, something like this. And that would make the turtle, look how far away it looks. It's big, but it looks far away. So let's go back to our original high contrast. We're going to bring our highlights down just a little bit. We're going to bring our shadows up just a little bit there. Our highlights down just a little bit more. And here we're starting to get something that kind of just like fits into our image a little bit more. And you want to kind of, work on these levels, and then, get something that's going to work also in comparison with all the other things right around that. But that's a way where you can lower the contrast of an object. And if it's too much, you can simply adjust these levels, or simply lower the opacity of that layer. And you can see there's our before, bit of a high contrast. Yeah. There's the after, a little bit lower. It's just gonna kind of match the contrast of the sky a little bit better. And again, that's another fantastic use for a black and white adjustment layer, because you're just working with the differences between light and dark. And then once you turn your black and white adjustment layer off, you can color tone, and then your turtle or whatever object you're going to be working with is going to not only match in light levels, it's also going to match in color as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of where you're at with is that where you're at with yours?
I'm about to work. I'm about to do some color work on this one. I'm having a lot of fun working on your image, as a matter of fact.
By all means,
it's
but I love that. So you're doing brightness contrast. That does a global, lights and darks.
Yes.
But then levels let you control, the blacks and the whites more specifically.
Exactly.
And then you dropped the opacity is still like a global move, right? Would you consider that? It's kind of more of a global move.
Yeah.
That all makes sense to me.
Yeah. And the idea here, because this is clipped to that turtle, we're using clipping masks here, right? So it's only visible where the turtle is. So it's a very good way to make the turtle blend in and work with the environment just a little bit better.
Yeah. Into it, man. Thank you so much. We need to work on her too.
Yeah, we'll do it. And if after this broadcast, if you want to, I'll work with you on this, and we'll have some fun, because
I encourage everybody to do this. Like, you do have 15 minutes to get your composition in, by the way, and have Aaron review it. But I'm kind of following along with you as you do it. I'm kind of trying to apply it here, and then having you bail me out. That's really what's happening.
Yeah, if you have a composite that you're working on, go ahead and pull it up and see if you can do some of these techniques while we do the broadcast.
Yeah, into it.
So we just took a look at our layer that's set to orange, and I set that to hue. Okay. Now the next check layer is very easy. We just take that same layer and turn it to saturation. All right, so if you want to do the same thing on yours, you just change it from hue to saturation.
Hello.
Hello. So this is a fantastic tool. Maybe we can switch it back to my screen. When this is set to saturation, it brings the saturation up of everything. And now we can see how our relative hues interact with each other. For instance, earlier I mentioned a little bit of purple in her dress. It was hard to see on the broadcast, but now you can see it, okay? Now, the deal here is because I've raised the saturation of everything in my image, it makes the differences in hue more obvious. Okay.
Totally.
So for instance, my subject's dress, let's just grab a bright color here. My subject's dress here is a purplish color, right? But there's no purple anywhere in this image, right? Like none of this stuff is purple. So my subject's dress should not be a purplish color. In fact, it should have a little bit of reflection from the ground. My subject's dress should have a little bit of this brown color in it, okay? And my subject's skin, especially in the highlights, should get some of the green color from my environment as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're just gonna create a new layer. Again, we want that to be clipped. We're gonna use our brush tool. Let's just turn this color fill off temporarily and turn it back on. Using my brush tool to sample this color here in the ground, I'm gonna now paint over top of our subject, and we're gonna change our layer blend mode of this from normal down to hue. So immediately,
You're just painting on that color?
yeah, I grabbed the hue of the ground and I'm just painting it over top of the dress. So let's just turn that off and on, okay? It's a subtle difference because it's almost black, but the before, you can see how it's basically just purple.
Yeah, you definitely, I noticed
You
it
can
on
see
your
it
monitor.
a lot on my monitor. Let me, you know what? Just for the sake of the broadcast, because I want to make sure everyone else sees this, I'm just gonna bring up a curves adjustment layer so they can see it more obvious there too.
Yeah,
I'm not
there we
gonna
go.
leave this curves on there in the final. I just want everyone to see this.
It's just a check layer.
So it's a check layer, exactly. So you have this purple from the original image. Now I took some of the color from the ground and painted it right over top of the dress and set that to hue. And now what we see is I've got some of the hue from, there we go, and I'm gonna continue painting it right here. I've got some of the hue from the ground, and now it's painting over top of the dress, okay? So again, that hue is simply replacing the hue of the dress from earlier. And in this case, it's so dark, I can probably leave this hue on at 100%, but oftentimes you'll wanna lower the opacity of that hue because, for instance, I want a little bit of the hue from the background to reflect on my subject too and her dress, right? But I wouldn't necessarily want this to be visible at 100% because I need some of the hue of my subject to show through. So what you would wanna do is simply lower the opacity of this layer and then you start to get a mix. See how they just simply blend together a little bit more there? There we go. Let's go ahead and clip this as well. Okay, I'm gonna make these invisible and just pull that color in. There we go. So I can make sure to match the hue of that dress. That's an important one. Okay, so now you can see we have a little bit of the color from the background that's extending onto our subject and helping her look a little bit more realistic. Okay, now all we have to do is we're just gonna turn these layers back off and you can see there's the before and after. So check it out. Here's our subject, there's the before, okay? The hues in my subject don't necessarily match the hues in my background, but I turn these on and they start to match a little bit more. Now the green in her skin is just a little bit too green. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this layer and we're simply gonna lower the opacity. I'm at about 30% of this now, okay? So 30%, and you can see, it's almost like you can't even really see that anything was done, but the subject just looks like she's in the environment. So there's the before and the after there. And you can see our subject is actually blending into the environment a little bit better because some of the hues from the environment are now in our subject's skin as well. So having this layer that's set to saturation allows us to see these differences in relative hues, and then you can make adjustments to your image using check layers and clipping masks to then work on bringing those differences in hue back together again. Okay, now there's one more fantastic technique that I'd like to show you, and this is using a tool called Apply Image. You ever used Apply Image?
No, I don't think I have.
It's a fantastic tool. You're gonna love this.
Yeah, I haven't used it.
Okay, so here's how Apply Image works, and Apply Image is a little bit.
Yeah, no. What is it?
It's a little, I won't say it's complicated, but it has a few different applications, so it just takes a little bit of time to kind of get your head wrapped around it. So I'm just gonna make sure we explain it well because it's incredibly useful. Apply Image is one of my favorite commands in Photoshop. So I'm gonna create a new layer here. Okay, a new layer, we're gonna go to Image and down to Apply Image. Now what we wanna keep in mind is Apply Image basically just applies what you see onto a layer. Okay, it just takes kind of like a snapshot of your whole image and then applies it onto a new layer. So in this case, I create a new layer. Now I can choose what I would like to apply. I can have it be merged, which will just be everything we see, or I can apply a specific layer. In this case, we're just gonna choose merged. You can also choose how this blends with your image. And we're just gonna go to normal right now. It's gonna be normal. You can invert it if you'd like to, which comes in handy for masks, but not necessarily for what we're gonna do here. And then I'm gonna just hit OK. And what we have on our new layer is simply, if I just grab my move tool, you can see I have my image applied on a new layer. Now, this can be very helpful, especially if you want to do liquify. Okay, let's say you've been working on an image for a while and then you want to do a liquify. You use an Apply Image layer, do the liquify on that, and then my advice would be to just mask in the areas where you liquefied so it wouldn't cover up the rest of the image.
Yeah.
Or you can run other filters like advanced blur filters that don't allow you to do them on new layers.
Yeah.
So
that makes
Apply
sense.
Image can be very helpful when we're doing this. However, there's another fantastic use for Apply Image.
Yeah.
You ready for it?
I'm trying to guess, but I don't know. Is it for shadows? Is it for the shadow? No.
It's not for shadows.
Okay, I don't know. What?
Okay, so up until now, we've used Apply Image on a layer. You can also use Apply Image on a layer mask. And then, super powerful. So let's just show you how it works, okay? We're just gonna create a new adjustment layer here. I'm just gonna grab a solid color adjustment layer. We're gonna choose a very bright color so everyone can see. Okay, our very bright color. Now, what we're going to do is I'm gonna go ahead and use Apply Image on the layer mask. Okay, but first I'm gonna make my layer invisible. Okay, we're just gonna make this layer invisible because I want Apply Image to not necessarily take this blue into account. Does that make sense? So let's make it invisible. Now I'm gonna click on my layer mask. On my layer mask, we're gonna go to Image and down to Apply Image. And then we're gonna choose Merged. And I'm gonna choose my blending mode as normal and we're gonna hit OK. So earlier we saw Apply Image will take a snapshot of your image and put it on a new layer. Pretty self-explanatory. This takes a snapshot of your image and puts it on your layer mask. Now, we all know that a layer mask will make your layer visible if it's light and invisible if it's dark. So when we apply image onto the layer mask, the lights and darks of the image itself control the visibility of that layer mask. So now if I turn this layer back on, it's only visible where the lights of my image are.
Which that looks really cool.
It looks cool, right?
Will you stop? And it's like, it keeps on getting cool. It's probably just some check layer, but I'm like, no, it's awesome.
It looks cool. Now let's take a look at the layer mask. So I'm gonna hold Alt or Option. We're gonna click and look at the layer mask. The layer mask itself simply looks like the image. Okay.
I had no idea that basically you just had that layer mask selected, and then you went to apply image.
Yeah.
That's all you had to do.
That's all you do.
Select it.
Now, the wonderful thing about that is you can use different blending modes with apply image. So let's make this invisible again. We're gonna go to image and down to apply image once more. This time, instead of choosing normal blend, I'm gonna choose multiply. And what multiply does is it takes the snapshot of my image and it multiplies it over top of the first snapshot of my image. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the multiply blend mode, that will make your darks even darker, but it's gonna leave your lights where they are. So your darks will get darker, your lights are gonna stay where they are, and what this is gonna mean, because you're on a layer mask, your darks getting darker on your layer mask will make those areas less visible on your layer. So what we're gonna see now, I'm gonna hit OK. What we're gonna see now, I'll hold Alt or Option and click on my layer mask. You can see how my darks are darker on my layer mask. And if I simply click this layer visible again, you can see now it's visible just in the highlights. Okay,
cool.
So we've refined this a little bit more. Now you can do this many different times. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it again, hit enter, and do it again, and hit enter, and look at this. Now this color, and by the way, there's no blending mode on this color. This blend mode of this layer is normal.
Yeah, that's pretty.
We are literally using the lights and darks of the image to define the visibility of this layer. So we can now, and this is just a solid color fill layer. So if we wanted, you know, to bring in another color here, we could most definitely do so. Very easy to do, just a fantastic way to color tone your highlights if this is what you wanted to do. You could bring in some interesting colors into your highlights.
Very cool.
Now we've got a great question. Tim asks, can you also do this with blend if? Now that's a fantastic question. Blend if is within your blending options of a layer. So if I double click here, we can see this is what we call blend if. It's also known as luminosity masking, by the way. So, or luminosity blending rather. So blend if will get you something similar, but in my opinion, apply image is a little bit more of a fine gradation between light and dark. For a lot of my career, I would have used blend if to do something similar. Now I'm finding that apply image just simply does a little bit better of a job keeping details and light and dark. So fantastic question. My suggestion would be to use apply image instead.
That's good. I know, you know, Jesus Ramirez?
Yeah.
He does a lot of the blend if.
Yes.
Too. So I'm sure he knows about this, but that's how I learned it from him. But you're taking it to the next level, you know, basically using this apply image method.
It's a fantastic method. Now here's where it gets even better. So with this apply image, we haven't actually used this for a real application in compositing just yet, right? Keep in mind, this class is on compositing. What we're going to do is we're going to take the highlights, the colors that are in the highlights of my image, and we're going to apply those over top of the highlights of my subject using apply image. Again, the whole idea here is we want to take colors and light from our environment and bring them into the colors and light of our subject. And that's going to help those two elements look like they're made to be together. So let's just go ahead and delete that layer. That's just a little test there. What we're going to do is I'm going to create a solid color fill layer. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and just make that invisible. I'm just going to choose a highlight color from our image here. Okay, there we go, and we'll just go a little bit on the green side. There we go. So you can see as of now, it's visible everywhere in our image. Now, let's go ahead and clip this to my subject. So I'm gonna hit Option Command G, and now this is visible everywhere. Visible everywhere. So, sorry, not visible everywhere, visible just where my subject is, okay? So again, I took some of the highlight color from my image, I just saturated it a little bit more, and now clipped it to my subject. So what we're gonna do is make this invisible now. I'm gonna go to my layer mask, we're gonna go to Image and down to Apply Image. We're gonna apply everything we see here to this layer mask. So let's hit OK and see what we have now.
Kind of.
We're taking some of the
tinted just the highlights.
We're taking
right?
exactly. It's just the highlights. So we're taking the colors. Sorry, we're taking some of the color of our image and now applying it just over top of the highlights of my subject. Now I want to do this once more because it needs to be a little bit more subtle. So we'll just simply make that invisible. We'll do it once more. Image down to Apply Image. Again, our layer is set to merged, our blending is set to multiply, and we're gonna hit OK there. Let's turn that back visible again. In this case, we're just going to now, check this out by the way, I can put, let's just go ahead and zoom into our subject and see how nice this is. Again, this is just set to normal. We're gonna change this, let's go ahead down to soft light. Okay, to soft light. And now we can see, as I start to pull in colors, you see those, how the colors of my highlight, the highlight colors of my subject, I now have complete control over. So this allows me to edit just the highlight colors of my image. So I can, for instance, I can just use my eyedropper here to just simply pull a color from this image. Look at that, I'm just using the eyedropper.
Yeah.
So I'm literally taking the color of the light of the background image and applying it over top of the highlights of my subject. So now the highlights of my subject mirror, can you see that? Before and after, it's a subtle difference. You can do the same thing with shadows, by the way. Subtle difference before and after. The highlight colors now of my subject become the highlight colors of my background.
Very cool. I'm into it, man. Honestly, compositing is all this subtlety, and I think you're just opening up my eyes to these little, what seem like subtle changes. Plus, I think it's so powerful that you're just using a color layer.
Yeah, it's just a solid color fill layer.
It's a solid color. I would never think that coming from a solid like color layer.
Yeah.
But all that magic's coming from that nice layer mask.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. We're just clipping. So let's check out just the changes.
And you do have soft
done.
light. You do have it set to soft light.
Yeah, I've got that one set to soft light. You can also, if you want it stronger, you could set it to overlay. Soft light is a little bit more subtle. So let's just turn these off. So that's where we started today. By the way, we are gonna do a little bit more work on this and make it look realistic.
Somebody does want you to add, I think it was Jimmy, who was like, add the shadow, please.
We will, don't worry. We're gonna get to that shadow. So this is where we started today, and this is where we're at right now.
Into it.
Couple little changes, nothing too crazy, but look how better our subject is. Here, she's cut out already, but she doesn't look like she's in that environment. And now she's starting to look like she's in that environment. She doesn't even have a shadow, but it's starting to look, here, we'll just do this. Check it out. So there's our before, does not look like she's in that environment. And here we go, she looks like she's in that environment. And then you can take any of these, for instance, if you did a color tone that you feel is maybe a little bit too strong, you just take it and lower the opacity, and there we go.
Do you, can I ask you to do something that you probably know of, but if you don't, I'm sure you've done this, but changed your layer thumbnails to be bounding box. So go in the flyout menu.
Yeah.
And then go down to options, panel options, and then just turn on layer bounds.
There we go.
Now you can see, just so everybody can kind of see what each,
Sure.
It looks like
I'll
that
just make
hair.
them larger
Is that the hair?
too.
Ooh, look at that.
Yeah, if you want to see what they look like a little bit larger. This, for instance, is where I just painted over with a hue blend mode. So I took colors of the environment and then painted over my subject with hue.
Okay.
Okay, this is where I painted
There's the
around
hair.
her hair. A little bit of flower work here. And then our levels, these are just working to match the levels of our subject to the levels of the background. And then here we have our solid color fill layer. Fantastic. We've got some more wonderful things, but it looks like it might be time for our challenge.
Yeah, look at you. You're on top of it. You don't need me. You're good. You're the man.
I need you.
Oh,
I
they
need
did
you.
The save though. They were like, please save your life.
Controller Command S, and we are saved.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into this. As Aaron suggested, we'll start at the top. Looks like we have quite a few. We'll go clear down to this one. So a good 15 or so, starting at the top. Van Damme designer in the house.
Yeah.
Creepy Forest
Very cool.
by Van Damme. It certainly is creepy and cool.
I am loving it.
Yeah. It's hard to know, like, I'm not sure what's composited. Like, this is pretty well in there. But yeah, it's awesome.
Very, very. That I would not want to be caught in there by myself in the middle of the night. That's for sure.
And then if you have any, like, pointers or anything as we go along, just holler it out, Aaron.
Yeah, no, looking fantastic. I would say, just a quick little pointer here. We have this flying beast on the right-hand side. You can see the tail here is just a little bit bright as compared to the background. And that would make sense if there was a bright highlight right behind. That would actually be illuminating the tail from behind. So to get that to blend a little bit better, you can use clipping masks and simply darken it down. And then maybe you can darken around the edges of the wings here as well. And that's just gonna help integrate that into the background. And then another fun thing you could do, because you have a nice highlight right here, you could then bring the highlight over in front of the subject and make it look like a little bit of spill or a little bit of flare that's happening over and in front of the subject. I think that'd be a fantastic addition to the image.
Into it. And really well done on the, like, sort of the limited color palette.
Yeah.
It works out really well.
Fantastic, fantastic.
All right. Lee designer.
Lee in the Hall of Fame.
This is, so again, these were, just to recap, these were submitted through the challenge tab, which is all about creating a, sort of a world or whatever, but this is cool.
I love it. Lee, can I request an image of me in the Hall of Fame as well?
Yes. And,
I think that'd make my family really happy.
Yeah. And Lee, how old is Lee? Is she like 7? I know she's younger than Van Damme.
Wow, it's so great on this channel. You get so many people of different age ranges. I love it.
Cal T. Webster in the house. Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
What's up, buddy? Awesome, Eber, I appreciate this. First off, straight up, you're using T-Rex. Sold. I love this. I love this whole image.
I'm into it.
Josh Wheeler,
T-Rex
fantastic.
is coming in from another dimension to terrorize the city.
Don't you hate it when that happens? Beautiful image. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, fantastic.
I don't have any comments there.
What comments would you have? It's awesome.
Very cool. Sherry Hubs. Little fantasy action going on.
Very nice, Sherry. Very, very nice image. Yeah.
Good limited color palette, which I'm like really into.
Oh, that's fun.
A main.
It's like a little stadium.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Parking is horrible, by the way. Like you're all you're parking in one town over, and then you get a hike to the stadium. But I'm into it.
I do dig it. Very, very cool image.
Yeah, good little composite. Octavio.
This is just fantastic. I found your Crocs.
That's awesome.
I could really see that as an ad for Crocs.
Yeah.
I never wanted Crocs until kind of right now I won't. Yeah.
Well, Crocs are like really in. I was visiting with my brother, and all of his kids like are in. Like that's the thing to wear. They're in Maryland, and that's like the thing to wear is Crocs.
Yeah.
Like all the different types. Like
Mario Batali wears them. That well-known chef.
Okay.
He's into his Crocs too.
This is really cool.
It's very cool. We got a little bit of a levitation, floaty type image.
And what really helps sell it is this like highlight. I could imagine he is composited, but this right here, that splash of light.
Definitely.
Makes it work.
Looking great. Fantastic. submission so far.
Genesis Shin.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Running out of time.
I like this light bulb coming in from the side.
Yeah, I really like that image also.
Alberto
Whoa.
Silva.
Looking out an airplane window.
That is talk about first class. Look at that. Huge window.
Very cool. I love the graphic style of this. It's like reminds me of like a 80s, you know, like a Grand Theft Auto Miami Vice kind of deal.
Yeah, especially that color. Very good. Ahmed Ijaz.
Yeah, nice job with the light bulb, kind of being reflected on the objects behind it. You can really get a sense of that light interacting with everything around it, and that's a fantastic way to composite.
And I like this person down here. You almost you don't see them. Definitely, you don't see them first. Like it's
right.
Your eye kind of ends up down here, and yeah, great little composition.
Definitely, we got a lot of like light bulbs coming in from
we do.
sides
All
of
these
images.
Bright ideas happening. Tim Kelly, very much like a Colorado image.
Yeah.
You know how there's like big old.
What is that? An elk?
Yeah.
Caribou?
Yeah, let's go with an elk.
I don't know my antlered friends that well.
You will at the end of the month with your little trip.
Oh yeah, I'm going to like the middle of nowhere, Colorado, by the way. So I hope
this
to
is
see
this
something
is
like
Aaron
this.
this week.
Yeah,
Like, at the end
that's
of the month,
literally
like,
me in Christmas.
No. Did you say no electricity?
Yeah, I'm staying in a cabin that has no electricity and no running water.
You got both of those? How did you find such a steal? It doesn't have electricity or running water?
Airbnb, man. Yeah, I lucked out.
I love teasing you. This is really cool. I love this. The complementary colors and brightness of it.
I dig how the fish is kind of going in the arm.
Oh yeah.
It took me a second to see that, but it's a nice detail.
Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that. Avis Lind, great job.
It's gonna be my Halloween costume next year.
Oh, this is a fun composition.
Oh yeah, it's like a bowl of ramen
And
or
then
something,
throw
but
a
also
moon
a moon in there.
And here's a ship. Oh, I like it. I like that I didn't notice that initially.
Yeah, it's a lot going on. Super fun image. I just love seeing composites that are like, I would have never thought to do that. You know, that's just fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, that is super fun. Super
fun.
SOUPER fun.
Oh, that's cool.
Kirill.
It's like they're kind of being morphed into another dimension here a little bit.
Oh,
like
yeah.
And Matrix type of deal.
Sucked in, sucking their face into their
Yeah.
phone.
I feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Basically every time I look at my phone. Like, can I just not have one of these?
That's what you're saying at the end of the month.
Yeah, that's my
Probably
lifestyle.
not cell service up there either.
No cell service, no. I mean, literally to just like drink water, we have to hike like a mile and drink it out of a stream. Like a legit, like...
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't. Please write. Like I want to.
Yeah,
I want to get the download after you're done. Like when you come back, I want to hear all about it.
I can't wait. It's gonna be fantastic.
Kirill again. Cool. You know how you're just like
out on a limb here.
Yeah. Just go ahead.
I'm digging it.
I
I did an image a long time ago where I was sitting on an airplane wing.
You did?
And this kind of reminds me of it. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it on the internet.
Dig it up. Capass?
Oh, I found it. This is I did this image, one of my early. Oh, internet's broken. It's just on like.
This is an Aaron Nace
How do we
original
zoom in?
from back in the day.
Yeah. If you guys want to see this, this was my version of it. I think this is over 10 years ago. I made this, one of my very early composites. And boy, I did not know about some of the things we showed you today when I made this. And I wish I did, because that shadow just does not look realistic at all. Nor does the light level look realistic.
It's amazing. It just shows how much you've grown. Like, you recognize it immediately.
Immediately, I'm like, wow,
And you're
I
probably
need
like,
to
why
change
did
a lot
I?
of these things. But at the time, I was very proud of this, and I think it's a beautiful way to progress as an artist. If you could look back on your work that you did years ago and know that you've come a long way.
The more it sucks, the better you've become.
You
I don't
really
know.
it really becomes obvious how much you've progressed as an artist, and I find that to be so valuable. So if anyone out there is just feeling a little bit like unsure of themselves, go back and look at some work you did earlier, and I know that you'll find that you've progressed as an artist, and let that be a tool to move forward and say, you know what, I am getting better at this, because I know as artists we can get down on ourselves, and that can be really tough. But go back, look at some of your older work, and instead of saying, man, that sucks, say, wow, I'm a lot better now. You know what? And in a couple years from now, I'm gonna be even better, and I'm on the right path, and I'm doing great.
Yeah, for sure.
We can get back to...
Yeah, here we have cap houses. Wonderful otherworldly design as well. I mean, it's tough to say.
Yeah, just all good things.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I want that to be me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting composition, like this corner and this corner. But yeah, I mean, it works.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. Keep doing what you're doing. And then this one's good by the Adobe Live team.
Placeholder.
Placeholder.
Is that it for today?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Let me just double check. By the way, just through the challenge tab, you'll enter yours in here, and you can go to view gallery. So I encourage you to jump in there and appreciate all these ones.
Submit away.
Yeah, by all means. Great work. Yeah, and very diverse in terms of like style and everything. It's like everything across the board. So
yeah, fantastic
it's
examples.
Right over here. So obviously we're playing right up here under challenge, and it is the Little Dream contest. So we're just trying to give you some pointers and some tips, and then ultimately enter them in this Little Dream contest as well. So you post to Instagram, Twitter, Behance, and check out the T&Cs. Make sure you're all squared away there. But we appreciate you submitting. Yes.
Fantastic.
So we have maybe about 8 minutes.
8 minutes. Let's
left.
get that shadow in there.
Oh, they've been waiting.
Let's get that shadow in
Yes,
there.
about 8 minutes. We will have Ted Chin coming up. Voodoo Val. They just walked in the room.
Hello.
While they're getting ready. They're doing their stretches. They're probably going to go get some coffee.
So this shadow, we're gonna just talk about the differences between flow and opacity real quick. If I have my opacity and my flow up to 100%, this is what we get. Now, if I bring my opacity down to about 50%, you can see through it, but if I go over an area, you can see that it doesn't have any build-up effect. Now compare this with a marker. Like let's say you had a Sharpie or like a permanent marker. If you drew on a piece of paper and then went over that line over and over again, it would get darker, right? Like as more you go over it, it's just gonna get darker and darker and darker. So because it's getting darker, that's like a natural media. That's how natural media works. You go over an area more and more and more, and it gets darker and darker and darker. Now flow is basically used to simulate that. So let's go ahead and now we're gonna bring our opacity back up to 100%. We're gonna bring our flow down to about 10%. And I'm gonna go over an area and you can see it's very light, but if I decide to go over this area more and more and more, you can see it just gets darker and darker and darker.
I like how you brought this full circle because this was the very first thing you asked at the beginning of the stream.
Does anyone know flow and opacity? Exactly. So you can see it's just getting darker and darker and darker. And I haven't let go of my brush a single time. But you can see how I'm able to get this very nice blending effect wherever I go over with my brush. So using flow as a tool can be fantastic. Now we're gonna do that to create our shadow, and what I'm gonna do is focus most of my, my painting in close to my subject, and it's gonna kind of flow out. So let's go ahead, we're gonna hold Alt or Option and sample this color from our subject's dress. And you can see I'm just doing a little back and forth here, starting with a low flow. You know, we're talking a flow, in this case, of about 10%. Let's choose a larger brush here.
Kyle's on board. Kyle is a big fan of flow. He doesn't use opacity at all.
You know what? I use only flow. My opacity is set to 100 almost all of the time. I very, very, very rarely will I change my opacity of my brush. So I'm using flow, and basically I'm just concentrating the density of my shadow right here towards the center of that dress, okay?
And this is another thing that you mentioned on the first day is the fact that anytime you're adding a drop shadow, it's usually multiple shadows.
It's usually multiples,
yeah,
exactly.
Like it's like more intense closer to her dress, and then there's that fall off.
Exactly. You want to make sure you get that fall off in there, and that just helps the overall environment be just a little bit darker from where your subject might be blocking light. So you can see this is a little bit of a build-up effect. I'm not using any special tools. Literally, I'm just painting this with the brush tool here. And because we have a soft light in our image, this is a little bit easier. Now, if I had a hard light in my image, I would actually choose some different techniques like duplicating our subject and painting our subject, duplicating our subject, and then doing like a little flip. So here we have, I painted in our shadow. Now let's just move this shadow here, right up here. So you can see it's kind of like dense here, and it just kind of fades off. So let's go ahead and put that back. Now, relatively quick here, my suggestion would still always be to create a black and white adjustment layer above that. And then my suggestion is to do your shadow work in black and white, because that'll just really, because again, we're working with lights and darks, right? So that's really gonna help you with your lights and darks. Now, my other suggestion, I got my shadows in there, they're looking really good. We just have a low contrast area. I do just wanna kind of lower, shadows have lower contrast than midtones. So another little trick we can do is we can just grab a levels adjustment layer, okay? And I can pull my highlights down and my shadows up just a tiny bit. Okay, this is lowering the contrast. I'm gonna invert that, and then we're just gonna paint this white on our layer mask. And then basically this is just gonna be like a lower contrast area right over here. Okay, there we go. We'll just make our highlights a little bit darker. So we're literally just lowering the contrast of this area where we have our shadow work.
I think Alexandria would love this image, by the way. This is like similar to her style. Like, you know, it's very, very nice. She's our guest. She'll come in at 1 p.m. We have a full day. I'm sure people are happy. They're like, yes, the shadow, finally.
The shadow, finally we make the shadow. And then the last tiny little detail that I'd like to add here, sometimes we want to bring little flecks of light back in where the shadows are. So what we're gonna do, I'll just create a new layer. We'll go to image and then apply image here. Okay, just everything we see looks great. Then I'm just gonna do a quick little selection of just the light areas. So let's just go to select, we'll just go to color range for now. And I'm just gonna select some of these highlights here. There we go. And then select those highlights. I'm just gonna pop a little mask on there. So we're gonna pop that mask on there. I'm gonna group this with itself, put another darker mask on there, and then just put in a little bit of these details. You can see just a tiny little detail from the shadow area.
Adding a little bit of those like highlights, those rocks.
A little bit, just like super, super subtle. And especially like the more we can do like around the edges, the better too. Like, you know, having some of those like highlights in there. And that's just gonna help a shadow, you know, this looks a little bit like muddy right now. It just looks like mud over the image. And just a little bit of those details can help a shadow look more realistic and a composite look more realistic in general. Now, if you want to duplicate or darken your shadow, you can just hit Control or Command J. Sometimes I'll like shrink it in and then have another shadow that I'll just make as like the core of my shadow. And you can always blur that if you need to apply a little bit of blur. And I know I'm going a little bit on the fast side here. Only reason is because we're limited on time. I want to make sure our other artists have as much time as they need to do their work as well. So we've just blurred that a little bit, but you can see our shadows are basically all of the work there was done simply with the brush tool by painting in using a low flow.
And I love the idea of, still bringing in some of those highlights. I think that really sold it for me. Instead of it being like a whole,
Yeah.
it just really brought it together and made it more realistic.
Exactly.
Wow, I would say this stream is like totally worth it to watch again as well. So you can find these in the replays tab, but stick around. Ted Chan's in the house. Voodoo Val up next. Everybody, thank you so much. Aaron, you're gonna be back with us tomorrow. So everybody stick around. We'll see you soon.
It's going to be an absolute blast. Thank you so much.
Yep.